So, it is my pleasure to welcome you all for our event Forced to Share and to Divide, a report from Myanmar. It's one of the key objectives of the Kultursymposium Weimar to bring international perspectives to Germany and let them speak about their point of view on issues like sharing and exchange and the economical implications of it, the social implications of it. So, we're really excited that we have a guest here with us today from Myanmar, Maung. He's a Burmese poet, editor, and visual artist, and he will be speaking to us about generosity and sharing in contemporary Burmese society. As you know, it's a country where almost 90% of the population are Buddhists, and it is also a country which is under international observation, if I may call it that way, because of the transitional period that it is undergoing at the moment. Maung was born in Myanmar and graduated from the Institute of Technology in Tanlin and Dagon University in Yangon. His poems have been published internationally by leading magazines, and his artistic work has been shown at home and abroad. In 2014, Maung was invited by the Kunstverein Göttingen to take part in an exhibition that was investigating the relationship between religion and the contemporary in Southeast Asia. So something that is a bit related to your talk today, I guess. He's also a translator for children's books, and he co-founded the celebrated Beyond Pressure International Performance Art Festival in Myanmar in 2008. After living in Thailand for a number of years, Maung is now based in Yangon, where he works for the Metta Foundation, a local NGO that's dedicated to improve the livelihoods and the resilience of local communities after years of conflict. I will now hand over to Maung for his presentation. I will then start off with some questions, and we can then just open the floor quickly also to your questions. Thank you very much.
Hello, nice to meet you all. And thank you, Konrad, for the introduction. I like to read an essay I've written. It's called Forced to Share and Divide, a report from Myanmar. Buddhist mythologies influence and shape the worldview of people in Myanmar, where Buddhists are 89% of the population. Generosity is one quality Myanmar Buddhists believe they should cultivate in themselves. And this belief is derived from many religious and cultural sources, especially from a story from Buddhist mythologies, in which King Visandara, believed to be one of the Buddha's past lives, gave away his throne, his positions, and even his son and daughter in his attempt to achieve the cessation of desire. Even though the moral of this story is to encourage people to be aware of harm brought upon oneself by his own desires and therefore to sever the cord of all forms of attachment. Myanmar Buddhists also believe that by giving away things, they will experience good karmic reactions in this life and after death. A sense of escapism can be discerned in this worldview, especially when people start to believe or are made believe it is a form of cleansing bad karma when somebody takes away things from them. And therefore, they should accept losses, their property, land, human dignity, without making any complaints. So, in Burmese context, especially in cultural Buddhist context, so bad things are happening to you because you have done bad things in your past life. So when we were undergoing this predicament, this harsh times under the military regime, a lot of people, trying to find consolation, and that is the idea of karma. And we are just, we are paying back so that we can be better in the next life. And this may be because people who lose what is important to them in life need to find some sort of comfort, and this belief could be a source of comfort. This type of forced charity has been observed over the past 50 years under the rule of military juntas. Here, I would like to also say that it's not just the military junta and the structure it imposes on the people, it also the religious institutions like Sangha, the monk institutions. They've been also promoting more materialistic, more escapist form of charity on people and making people feel guilty if they cannot do that. It may be justifiable to give away one's possessions as long as the giver feels free to do so, and as in the story of Hans and Luck. However, when it is forced upon you, it is no longer justifiable. Chronic poverty and social disparities in Myanmar are the results of the self-serving government and private sector forcing people to give away their possessions, to give up their means of livelihoods. The quasi-civilian government has embarked on liberalization of trade and investment and mega-project infrastructural development as quick wins and immediate agendas of reform, informed by the framework for economic and social reform. This has been elaborated through the development of special economic zones in Tawai, Tilawa, and Chaupyu, plus several more planned infrastructural development and resource extraction projects such as the Misong Dam, the Kaladan Transport Hub, the Shui gas pipeline, and various mining and agricultural concessions, among others, all of which are viewed as strategic drivers for the realization of framework for economic and social reform, aims of inclusive growth and poverty reduction. However, these development projects have led to a number of structural disconnects, a disconnect between the financial and the real economy, a disconnect between the infinite growth imperative and the finite resources of the biosphere, a disconnect between the haves and the have-nots, a disconnect between institutional leadership and people, a disconnect between gross domestic product and well-being, a disconnect between governance and the voiceless in our political systems, a disconnect between actual ownership forms and best societal use of property, a disconnect between technology and real societal needs. These structural disconnects have in turn caused exponential growth in land grabbings across the country relating to vast concessions given to agribusiness and expropriation of land for large-scale infrastructure and resource extraction, affecting the livelihoods or well-being of people while the environment is also a victim. It is unjustifiable when giving is forced upon, and political and economic structures are designed to impose forced giving on people. And now I would like to expand on the state-sponsored deprivation of identity. One thing, probably the only thing, we shouldn't share, give off, or let somebody take away from us is the right to our own identity. I come from an Indian diaspora that migrated into what is now called the Republic of the Union of Myanmar back in the 11th century. Nothing is original. Cultures and people move and mingle. I have become half Indian, half Myanmar somewhere along the process. I contain generations of my ancestors, and many of them had intermarried. My father, a retired teacher, is a countryman who believes in the Baha'i faith, and my mother, who is more Myanmar than Indian, is a Muslim. I grew up to become an agnostic who has a lot of interest in Buddha's teachings. I am besides an artist, a poet, a translator, a social activist, a cultural activist, a film buff, and a music crazy. I'm a heterosexual with a lot of gay, bisexual, and lesbian friends. This is me, and I'm happy this is me. However, I have been subject to discrimination based on my color and Indian origin. I studied at schools whose textbooks and routines were heavily Brahmanized and Buddhismized. Schools in Myanmar are propaganda machines for the nationalist agenda of military governments of old and the previous quasi-civilian government, who were almost entirely composed of the Buddhist Myanmar. These schools and education they give have denied my right to identify myself the way I wish to, but rather trial to make me surrender to the manipulation, oppression, and forced assimilation. State-sponsored deprivation of the right to own one's identity has affected ethnic minorities throughout the country for generations. This has served as a backdrop for ongoing ethnic conflicts with the Myanmar army and the army's resource grabbing. The ongoing nationalist agenda is not confined only to education. It is everywhere from the media to employment criteria. It is a chip that has been implanted in the mindset of millions of people who carry out the task of discrimination and bigotry in everyday life. I visited the famed confluence of the Ayawari in Kachin State last year. I'm aware, I think you're aware of the Ayawari River, which is quite famous and have very cultural ties to people, and also a lot of livelihoods depend on it. So I saw a Buddhist stupa on the bank of this river, shining bright in the sun and its bells chiming sweetly. The scenery was beautiful. What was ugly is the god-awful fact that the inhabitants of the nearest village were Christian, and a Buddhist temple is the last thing they need. There have been similar cases where the Myanmar army built Buddhist temples and stupas in non-Buddhist villages. Going back to my case, or the case of Indian descendants in Myanmar, Kala, a derogatory term for Indians, or most people from South Asia, is a household word in the country. People have come to say the word in my face a lot of times, putting me in a stereotype group and denying all those crucial aspects of my life and identity. However, this has not stopped me from identifying and expressing myself the way I wish to. In fact, it should not stop anyone. The right to one's own identity is one thing everybody simply do not want to share. And it is something we shouldn't let anybody take away from us. Nobody is only one thing. Nothing is original. I am various, you are various, everybody is various. The right to be whoever one wishes to be must not be given up. Now, I prepared a few slides, just some pictures. So Myanmar has a population of 60 million people, and 70% of them rely on agriculture. But over the past 20 years, the conglomerates, the military, officers and cronies have colluded to take millions of lands from the poor. And what you are seeing is called plow protest. So land is taken from the farmers, then farmers go to the land to plow, and illegally, so as an act of resistance. But then you will see bulldozer and police coming and cracking down on these farmers. It's still a very big issue, and Myanmar, the country's economy has been affected by this for a long time. And now we have the new government led by NLD party. They are trying to address this issue, and they are trying to reform the structures of land management bodies. But we still have to see what comes next. This is a chain store, called City Mart. It's everywhere, like 7-Eleven in Thailand. But a lot of these buildings, these stores, sprang up where public spaces used to be. So I grew up on suburbia where I played. There was a park, very nice park. I used to play there. But the last time I visited there was this supermarket. And I don't know who authorized it, for sure, the local government. But a lot of public spaces, our parks, our playgrounds have been taken away by corporations and the government. And structural violence to people, that I just mentioned that a lot to you too. This is Kachin people. This is the Kachin dance. Kachin live in the north of the country, and they are one of the very few strongest groups still resisting to I think to crawl to the military and what they're being trying to ask. So you might have heard that a lot of ethnic groups have signed the peace agreement, but Kachin haven't. So they are still fighting, and I think this is all for now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Maung. That was a tour de force, I think, through Myanmar and through your own identity and through your own work. Since it's your first time in Weimar, as far as I know, and we're in the city of poetry, of German poetry and writing, I just would like to ask you about your impression of the town, walking around it. Is this a town of poetry still?
I haven't come across any poetry reading, but it's stunning. The town is really beautiful, and I'm really proud to be, doing this. Where the German poet. This is the Goethe-Nationalmuseum, and I'm really proud to have this kind of experience. And I really like the town. It's really beautiful.
Okay. I want to come back to something that you mentioned in your lecture, which was focused around the recent political developments in Myanmar and how the government is acting. You said they're largely focused on quick wins. Now, the German or European perspective on Myanmar at the moment is a very hopeful one, a very positive one. The newspaper Die Zeit characterized it, the recent events, so the elections last November, which brought into power the first civilian government in Myanmar and also the election of the new president, as a potential Asian 1989. So compared to when the Iron Curtain fell in Europe, is that something that still is something like a hope or a potential that you see, or how do you look on those first months of the new government?
I think the landslide win, at the election by NLD, it was great because the people finally felt relief. It was an important closure for people. And very symbolic, and so that was important. And people are hopeful. I'm hopeful. Everybody's hopeful. But also, we should realize that still the army is in power very much so, because the most important 3 ministries are in their control: the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Border Affairs, and the security. So, when we talk about these ethnic groups and peace, and army would be the key player there. So I think the strategy of the new government would be, so now we are, as much as taking the space as much as they can until they kick them out at all. But, that's going to be very difficult. It will take time, but, it is very early to say everything it's too soon to say everything. But I think also we should realize that we don't know how much, many the previous government taken from investors. For example, we don't know what is the value of the gas deal with Thailand, because we,
sorry, what to interrupt? What's the?
We are selling natural gas to Thailand,
okay,
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we don't know how many years is it for. We don't know how much money it has generated. We don't know. So it means that this new government has a lot to shoulder. Maybe they don't have any resources now, and I think it's going to be really difficult for them. Yes.
So in terms of concrete action, I've read about a beautification litter picking campaign that was launched.
Yeah.
What are other examples of what they? I know the restrictions on what their navigational spaces, if you want.
Yeah.
Are there other examples of their first actions which kind of stand out to you?
That's a very difficult question. I think Aung San Suu Kyi is a visionary, and but when you become part of the government, but what I'm seeing is also taking on the form of a little bit of populist government to me. We are not supposed to pick up the garbage. To me, we are supposed to, do something to reduce the garbage that goes into the houses, that comes out. So, this is, very symbolic to me. We are cleansing, the whole town, the country. But I understand that, that attracts people. So, now, it has become freer to speak. media freedom,
So those are actual facts.
Yeah, so censorship is quite, it's gone. So, and also, NLD, they have said that their first priority would be the peace process. Because, peace process is a lot about the resources, right? So, but I also have a feeling the NLD would be pursuing a liberal economy model. I think this is every government does, This is, I think, how they're trying to legitimize themselves these days. So there might be something not very nice between the civil society and the government, I think, in the near future.
That's interesting, though, because you said that the legitimization is closely tied to Buddhism, and that there is something coming from Buddhism that sort of provides that legitimization to a forced sharing. And I was actually wondering, given that, imagine that there was a completely democratic government in place, and freedom of speech, free press, and a liberal society, probably comparable to ours, and the same things would happen that happen now. Would you still be critical?
I think I represent civil society. I think everybody should be critical. We always have to contest the government and what they do. But the issue is, sometimes people believe in somebody is too much. So, they respect somebody too much, and then you cannot touch that person. That might be the case in my country now. So media is very careful, how they write about, the NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi. And, for instance, students always are always forefront. Whenever something happens, they are always a group that people really love and want to support. But now they still want to pursue their protests that they have done in the past. Last year. But then people turn against them. People are saying, you shouldn't be doing this. Now you have got the government we want. But the students were saying, but what we've been asking haven't been granted yet, right? So what I'm saying is that, now people have to be careful, and that this is not good.
As I understand it, it's a somehow fragile situation, because the government still doesn't hold, the civil government still doesn't hold the key ministries, and also Aung San Suu Kyi couldn't become president, and there is various things in place to make it a disciplined democracy, I think, as they call it. So maybe that's
discipline-guided democracy.
Yes. So that might be a reason why people are very hostile towards criticism of the civil government.
It's quite delicate situation. I agree.
But coming back to the role of Buddhism, what struck me was that you said there is a misconception or a misunderstanding of Buddhism that's put forward. Now, I'm not an expert in Buddhism, but I would really like to know who is, I think you hinted at it in your speech, who is putting it forward? Where is it put forward that you should accept suffering, or taking away of your land, or taking away of your property as something that's related to former lives and that can cleanse your karma? Is that a teaching that is sort of, is that a common teaching, or is it a misconception, or is it?
I don't. What I'm trying to say. It's taught by monasteries, monks, religious institutions, and the textbooks, and every moral stories that we read in Myanmar. And people should be willing to accept the losses, because that's what happened. For instance, you are a boxer, for instance. People will come to say, you are suffering, you are boxing. It's not sport. You're suffering because in the past maybe you killed a chicken. Something like that. So, but what I'm trying to say is, people tend to become passive. When they have to act.
Yes.
Because they're taken. Back by this conception. Their concept of karma. So what I'm trying to say is, sometimes we need to stand up and do what is right for them,
But the interesting thing is now that there is actually injustice that has been done in the past, and people are standing up to it and realize that, you know, with the pipeline project, for example, or also with those new economic development zones, that depriving them of their land deprives them of much more than their land, and that they are worse off afterwards, and that promises aren't beheld by the companies that came in. So do you think this will reflect back on their religion? Sort of like when they see, or will they, because I think they become more active, at least what I'm reading, because it's also it's a topic in the Financial Times, etc. You know, land grabbing. Investors are afraid to move into Myanmar because there's so much uncertainty about which land belongs to whom. But my feeling is that there is more, and you can probably talk from your work as an activist, there is more of a response now.
I think the worldview I was discussing, it's you know, embedded in the everyday life of every single Myanmar person. But you know, we've been seeing, you know, people are getting more engaged in you know, activism, you know, protests and etc. We should also acknowledge that, you know, the role of civil society has been, you know, really expanding. You know, over the past, 10 years, there has been gradual movement, you know, happening very, you know, in a low profile manner, and you know, it's been still, going on, you know, and then, you know, also there was support from the international community, because, you know, at that time you should, you know, it comes that way, but unlike these days, right? These days, government to government, and you know, big donors go into government, and you know, strict. So a lot of these things happening because also, you know, civil society actors have been working with communities for a long period of time. But also we should be aware that what we are seeing is a very small amount of, you know, what it is actually. We are not reading a lot of stuff about, you know, what's happening to Rakhine, you know, Shan, you know, and Kachin and Karen.
Is there, in your view, is there also a positive effect from international money coming to, or investments coming to Myanmar? Is there something visible to you as someone who lives there, or is it?
You mean
so, for example,
business sector, or?
Yes, yeah, or like, you know, the clothing industry is opening factories. The Heineken opened a factory there. These are all examples which are, you know, in the economic theory, in the pure economic theory, positive, but depending on their outcome, I would say, how do you judge them?
For me, you know, we should be really careful with that. You know, so we're, still a struggling country. And I'm not sure we should be buying seeds from Monsanto, for instance.
Yes.
You know, so people are facing these land grabs. And you know, and also, you know, the expectation coming from the cronies, also that's from business sector, and then, you know, cronies, you know, going to work with these you know, international corporations.
Say it again, the
cronies mean, you know, people connected to the government.
Okay.
And, you know,
yes.
also in the past, the military officers walk through them, you know, make them work for them, earn money for them, right? So they still have a lot of power and money. So for us, I think it's really challenging if international companies are coming in. And, you know, now we have, I don't know, that's also one thing, I know the new government has a lot to work for. The previous government, before they go, they drew a lot of policies that protects their interests. For example, seed policy, you know, agricultural policies. You know, there's no role for farmers in those policies, and there's a lot of room, you know, for the business sector and, you know, the corporations. So, you know, what might happen is, like, companies like Monsanto will come in, and then, you know, the farmers will have to give up their local seeds. So I think in that, if it's going to happen like that, it's not good, you know, economic liberalization. I don't think so.
But it's at least, even with the new government, they're steering towards that, right?
I think that's how they do it, every government, I think.
Yes, yes. You're also, as I said in the opening, I mean, you're an artist and a poet and also an activist, or should I turn it the other way around? Oh, everything intermingled. So you work as an artist, and you've been presenting your poems worldwide. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the situation of artists has been in the past, and if it has changed over the last couple of months or years?
Like I said, the freedom of expression, it has become much better than in the past. So now we can draw, paint nude and stuff. There was an exhibition, for new paintings. I mean, this is important because artists should be working very freely. But there's one thing, there's a trick in it too. In the past, a lot of art, poetry writing, coming from the anger, towards the government, the military government, right, the regime. But now we got a new government, and that's everybody wants. And I'm thinking we don't have any common enemy. I'm thinking there might be a shift in how artists and poets will be, creating art, and that's going to be very big crisis, aesthetic crisis. Because Myanmar artists and poets tend to be very political. I mean, there's a long history of it, but that also means there is room, there for larger experimentations, collaboration with different countries, bringing in different media, and I think there's a lot of possibilities and exciting.
And maybe to close our conversation off a little bit. We're here as part of an event organized by the German Kultursymposium, which now also is active in Myanmar. And coming back to the theme of sharing and exchange, what do you, as an artist that is based in Yangon and based in Myanmar, what do you expect from us as an institution? And I'm speaking just because I work for the Goethe-Institut. Yeah. What can we share? And you're now sharing something with us. What can we share, or what are we already sharing? What do you think works well in that respect? Because everything is opening up now, right? And
Goethe-Institut in Myanmar is working really well. I think they've been reaching out to artists and poets and also civil society sector to work with them. I think just keep up the good work. And, I think this is good, and I think more collaborations coming. And I'm very grateful that I'm invited to come here, to talk about these things. And I think more people should have chance to come, for exchange and to open up doors, and I think it's good. It will be better. Yeah.
Because as you said earlier, we're predicting a crisis of the arts. And now, and I'm taking a more critical point of view again, we bring in international performing arts, like I think Sasha Waltz was there for a big opening event. And there will be influences coming as well that are probably disruptive or very different. And do you welcome them, or do you think?
I think we should work with the possibilities. We should work with every opportunity we have. I don't think, like I just said, art is not a static thing. It's we have to work with different kinds of things, bring it in, integrate into it. Myanmar art is pretty much coming from the European modernism, right? The artists from the 20th century, late 20th century, they incorporated a lot of impressionism into Myanmar art, combining with the Myanmar aesthetic called Myanmar Anat, meaning the scent of Myanmar. So what we are doing is also, nothing is, we're kind of a purist.
Yes. Nothing is original, as you said earlier on. Thank you very much. I'd like to open up the conversation for questions. Do we have a microphone? Yes. And despite of the Myanmar climate, hopefully there will be some.
Thanks for your lecture. And I have a question. It was mentioned that you already also work as a media artist. And I wonder how is the situation of media art in connection or in comparison to a possibly existing Myanmar film industry? I don't know anything about it. Is it stronger controlled, or is there by now also the chance for some sort of opening or changing, or would you say or in a wider respect, what is the situation of media art and film industry with respect to those prefab identities that you mentioned that you're forced to share and that you're not allowed to live in according to the rules of the identity that you described for yourself?
Did I get it right? Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'm often very upset about it, about how a lot of minorities are still, subject to discrimination and stereotyping, etc. But the film industry in Myanmar is I would say toilet water. It's in the toilet. It's really bad. And people are still making these films where they would, mock at, Indians and the Chinese, speaking in tongues and, making the accents and, acting like gay and, and we don't really have a good film industry today, but it used to be really good in the past, especially in the 60s and 70s. We love these films. But the possibility also for international community to work together and to collaborate is there have been several film workshops happening in Yangon and Mandalay in the past few years. One comes from Czech Republic, the FAMU University. They've been conducting film workshops in Myanmar, and they also have brought some students, to Czech Republic, and so there has been a few short films, which is quite exciting, and also some people based in Berlin, they have opened up a film school called Yangon Film School, YFS, and they have also produced some filmmakers, cinematographers, and this young generation, I think, will be very instrumental in paving the way to better film making in the future. But filmmaking is still controlled by the Ministry of Culture, pretty much. But now we have the new ministry, so we still have to see what kind of budget will be allocated and how they go. It's quite difficult now because we are like walking in the dark. Now we've got ministries and ministers, and we don't still hear much from them. Maybe they are still I don't know, but I think after 100 days of their preparation, I think we'll hear more about it.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much. What is very disruptive, the Myanmar example for Western worldview, is that Buddhism is not just the peaceful religion that, as it's always told us here in the West, but that it's used by a military government to disrupt people's lives in Myanmar. But then again, we had these pictures of the saffron revolution all over the place in 2007. So Buddhism is both a force of resistance and a force of the government, and these people are related. They're in the same family, the monks and the military. They share the same table, they share the same mothers. So this is not an ethnic conflict, but it's a conflict within the religion. I don't know. But maybe you can tell us more about how Buddhism comes to be used both in two directions. Yeah.
So it's quite, you're right. Buddhist monks have been leading people, in protests, because, they thought the soldiers wouldn't shoot them, right? Because they're wearing robes and, but they shot them anyway. But you're right, and the monks have been taking leading role, in these protests and activism. But again, we should be, aware that now we have a monks organization called Mabata. That organization has been formed to protect race and nationality and religion. And a lot of monks are the same monks, so yeah. So when it comes to like the military and, when they are representing a lot of people, it's one thing. But when it's about minorities, and especially towards Indians and, Indian Burmese and Chinese Burmese is different thing, us and them. So it's a quite tricky thing. And also, I also mentioned about it, we have very problematic textbooks at school and even at university. So for instance, we have, in our school system, you go through until 10th grade before you go to the university. So when I was doing my 10th grade, so we also read poems. So one of the poems, it's a lot of poetry, a lot of stories about encouraging nationalism, uniting everybody as one, but the Brahmin as the leader. So one of the poems is war poem, like war dance, when somebody reciting something and people recite back. So one of the lines is like a brown horse is the best horse, and Kala are the best slaves. Kala means Indian. So I was in the classroom. So what happened is, after a while, your friends notice that you're different, and that comes into your conversations, and you are mocked at, and so I think it's not really nice. It's not really nice, and I've seen a lot of also these ethnic minorities, drop out of school because of these situations, and teachers are not there to protect them. Teachers are also minions in the system, and they just carry on this tradition. I mean, we are still talking, it's still a big issue. We are even saying, Aung San Suu Kyi is not speaking much, right? Speaking enough. So I think this is right, but I think it's gonna be also one of the very, very, very important issues.
You want to ask another question? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Maybe you can tell us something about now, since Aung San Suu Kyi or NLD is the leading government, what is their relationship they entertain with religion? Because it's still, to me, a Buddhist government in some way. And Aung San Suu Kyi in particular has been criticized also internationally that she doesn't deal with the question with the Rohingyas in democratic ways. So what is your opinion on that?
I think everybody is quite, cautious this time. People are really careful what they say, and then that's, the same goes to the NLT, and the new government. Aung San Suu Kyi might be careful what she says might be used against her. So I think she's been careful with this Rohingya issue as well. But that's one thing. But for me, I'm saying that's also how you say it, right? You have to reframe things. You can restructure things and give it back, but not saying at all. It's another thing, And I don't know. This is right. But in case of the Rohingya, it's concentration camp up there. It's barbed wires and zonings, and cut off the livelihoods, and separate schools, and lack of school actually. So and I think the government also cannot touch it really, and yeah, they also, I think, worry about it. But when it comes to Rohingya, is strange. People even cannot talk about basic human rights or sympathy at all. It's just they are not us. Get them out of here. And for me, I mean, what a lot of people have been here for many years, and there has to be a procedure, right, to acknowledge them as citizens, and then there has to be a procedure to come up with a better immigration policy. That does you have to deal with that way. But now it's not in the hands of the government, and it's sometimes in the hand of the people, vigilantes, and I think it's not really good. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing. While we understand that the military was actually in charge of 3 of the most important ministries, so every time when you say government, I'm a bit confused, because this government is not in control of some of the most important matters of the country. So are there actually movements that will happen within the people to ask for this shift of responsibilities, that they be placed back to the government? Because I see a number of difficulties, because even when you say NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi, but because she's not the president, so she's the advisor, and so that actually can create a lot of constitutional issues, which may actually create even more problem in the new development. And actually, I'm also wondering how much patience does Burmese have for this government? Because it is like what you have mentioned, it's really a tough order. They have no resources, and we are all looking at them and hoping that something new would happen. Yeah. So going back to again, then just beside all this question, I'm thinking about while we also understand that the Buddhism itself as a religious body becoming a political force, but it could also, because of its spirituality, could that become part of the kind of approach that will help to reconcile the country towards something, especially in face of the onslaught of all the new investment that's going to come in, all the various different countries will be putting in their foot within the country.
So I think it was 2 questions. The first was about the power of the government, given that it has no key ministries, or it lacks the key ministries, and where do you think the change will come from if there's initiatives that are already in place? And the second one was about the role of Buddhism in a kind of uniting Myanmar, especially with the international input. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
I think there has also been some positive changes, and a lot of that coming from also civil society movement, that we have seen in the past several decades. But I feel here's the problem. The new government is quite young, and their senators are quite young, and there should be a better relationship between civil society actors and the government, I believe. But then there has been, a little bit of rift these days, between the government. And so if this is not a good sign to me, if we were to change everything, I understand Aung San Suu Kyi is limited to power, but again, she also is quite dominant, I would say, and so I think the collaboration between the civil society and Aung San Suu Kyi and the people would be quite important in the future for changes we want to move. And then it goes to the second question, the religious, bodies becoming quite strong, because they are another wing of the military government and also their party, right? So you might have heard, in the past few months, in current state, some monks go to a church premise and they build a stupa. So this kind of act.
Where did they go? I didn't get that.
They built a Buddhist temple next to a church. On the premise of it.
Okay.
So this is quite provocative, right? This, then Christians leaders have to come out and tell other Christians, be patient, don't. So it's sensitive, and violence can take place any time. And still we have this constitution of old, there hasn't been any changes made to it. So this is a quite, I think, delicate time as well. I mean, things can go in a very good direction, also can really go back.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay, so with that, I will close the conversation. Thank you so much, Maung Dae, for coming and for speaking with us. And thank you very much for all of you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the Kultursymposium Weimar.